holidays was to take the Muppets Christmas Carol, and we want to look at the ghosts of Christmas. And really is just kind of a jump-off point into some ideas that we wanted to talk about, how the past can negatively affect us, how we can not be present in the future and enjoy its abundance and its goodness. And then this morning, what we're going to look at is the future and all of the emotions that the future can elicit in us, and how we can maybe not respond properly to the emotions that the future elicits in us. So, as we have for the last couple weeks, we've taken a little snippet from the Muppets Christmas Carol. It's just beautiful, wonderful, full of vigor and life and ridiculousness. But as we kind of plan to jump off from the video, I want you to notice specifically as we watch the video, what are the ways in which Scrooge especially conceives of the future, and the way that he kind of talks about what's possible or maybe not possible in the future. And then what I want to do is I want to jump in and kind of unpack the way that we can approach the present based on the way that we conceive of the future. Tiny Tim is dead. Gosh, I know. So there's a few things in there that I wanted to kind of want to pull on, and preaching is something that's fun for me-ish, but I have a lot of resignations about preaching as well. There's a lot of, how do I put this? Inside of Christianity, there are a lot of very, very complex mysteries that we have to engage with on a simple level. Because the complexity of those mysteries are not just about Christianity. Those complexities have more to do with human existence. They have more to do with kind of like what you're grappling with there. Even when Ebenezer is looking at the death of Tiny Tim, he's asking questions about, is there anything that you can do now that actually affects the future? It's not necessarily a Christian question. That's a human existence question. You know what I mean? And it's a very complex question because it's not true that I can control the future, but it's also not true that I can't influence the future. So there's little lines in there, right when that particular ghost gets there, he says, "I fear you more than any specter that I've yet met." And then you see kind of around the whole picture of the ghost of Christmas yet to come, it's fear. Even, what are the names of those two ridiculous ones that go and hide? And they said, "We'll come back at the close." But you're even seeing they're scared. And then the depiction, very different from the Ghost of Christmas Present, where he was a large, happy spirit that was overcome with abundance. Now you have this faceless, scary spirit that Charles Dickens, when he wrote the book, was really trying to use imagery to lay something onto us, that the future is something that we can't see, we don't quite understand, we can't grapple with, and we're kind of groping at it to kind of make sense and to help us understand what we should do now, but we're groping at something that we can't feel out, we don't understand, we can't make sure that anything happens, we can't control, and at a deep level we know it, and so it brings up a lot of uneasiness. And so really, as we naturally just, as I scroll Twitter last night, you're naturally on the verge of a new year. You talk in phrases and you think in concepts about what this next year brings. You know what I mean? We tend to do that because right now, for whatever reason, we've had a late night, popping fireworks. We've gotten up early to go to church, and we are conceiving of what all the new year might bring. And if you remember last New Year, I got up on the stage and I said something very specific. I said, this year that's in front of us is going to have difficulties, and it's going to have pleasures. It's going to have pain, and it's going to have good things. And so I want, whenever I get a chance to get on the stage and speak, I want us to kind of dive into the complexities, the mysteries, the beauty of things. And I also want to do it as far as I can without platitudes. I want to do it without saying things that are just kind of like rote, routine, meaningless, churchy kind of things. So really, I want you guys to kind of amble along with me into a mystery, if you'll do that with me. So as you consider all the responsibilities that you carry, all the different realms of responsibilities that you have, and what you'll need to be doing this next year, and then potentially even the uneasiness or the dis-ease that can come with that, I want us to gather strength from the right place today. I really want us to do that because I think we can conceive of the future in a way that allows us to gather strength, or we can conceive of the future in a way that actually robs strength and makes us act in the present in ways that we're not happy with and don't produce the life we want. So kind of the way that I want to approach this is pretty simply, again, because I'd like to keep this as narrow as I can while going into a complex mystery, and as direct and short as we can, because I just want to honor our time. I want to honor the fact that people are going to be standing around in the back and that we're tightly packed. So if you would, let's do this. We're going to look at one psalm and one proverb, and we're just going to kind of dive down into those a little bit. So if you would, and if you don't have a Bible, that's okay. It'll be on the screen, Psalm 115. And it's verse 16. And it says something that's really interesting. And if you've been around a while, you know this is something that I bring up kind of often, but I like to bring it up a lot, specifically because it's one of those things that I want to hit from 1,000 different directions because it's so important to what it means to be a human. Psalm 115:16 says, "The heavens are the Lord's. The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of men." It's an interesting verse, right? And the reason I bring that up is this. There are two places that we can go when we conceive of the future or when we get hit in the present with things that are difficult. There's two places we can go that I would say they are not helpful. And the two places that we can go in that is we can go to a place where we do actually try to control the future because we're so concerned about the past getting relived in our life, or we can go to a place where we're completely resigned from doing anything at all because we believe that the future is fatalistic. We believe that the future is set in stone and there's nothing that we can do to influence that. So we can go to two different places as we conceive of how to relate to the future, how to conceive of the future, and how to think about the future. We can go two wrong places because, and it's easy to go those places because there are bits of truth in each side of those things. And the reason that I bring this up to get to the answer to that question is this. We can, in Christianity, conceive of the fact that God is sovereign, has power, has control. We can conceive of him then as a being who is controlling everything, who is pulling the strings on everything that goes on in our lives. If somebody dies, it's easy to say, well, God caused that to happen. If a pipe bursts over a stage, it's easy to say, God caused that to happen. And then we just need to figure out why he caused it to happen. But we can look at all of existence, and then we can paint all of existence as this script that God is writing, and it's easy to do that because we want to and do believe that God is a sovereign being who does have power and control and can do whatever he wants. And the reason I bring this text up is because it kind of succinctly states something that the entire narrative of the Bible is talking about the entire time, from Genesis to Revelation. But it's succinctly saying something, that the heavens are the Lord's heavens. And at the beginning of the psalm, in Psalm 115, I think it's verse 3 or 4, it says the Lord is in the heavens and he does all that he pleases. And so it's easy to look at he does all that he pleases and think, okay, he's up there doing whatever he wants and we just have to play along. But at the end of the psalm, it says something very specific. But the earth he has given to the children of men. And so the phrase that I've put around this idea is that Earth's future is a joint venture. Earth's future is a joint venture. So if you're going to look at that from Genesis 1 and the opening narrative there, the concept that you're going to get in those first few chapters in Genesis is that God creates a space, he orders it and causes it to flourish with life. He then creates humans, and then he creates a garden. The rest of the world is not a garden. It's not an ordered, life-giving place. It is a desolate wasteland. He creates a place that is a garden, and then he places humans in it, and he gives them a job. He says, work it and keep it. But the concept there behind it is be fruitful and multiply and expand the boundaries of this ordered, life-giving place so that the work of the hands of humans or the lack of work of the hands of humans will actually affect the nature and the landscape of the earth itself. And so the concept that's really interesting that the ancient Israelite writers were writing and the New Testament authors are picking up on is something really kind of beautiful. It's the reality that God has made everything and has power to do whatever he wants, but then he created other beings that he actually gave, like, agency is the best word for it, but it was not a word we use a lot. Agency is the word. He gave them the ability to affect his creation, if I can put it that way. He gave them the ability that their choices actually matter in what unfolds. But he also made it to where he is taking that creation to a destination. And the power of God is not that he can control everything. The power of God is that he can actually give choices to humans, give freedom to humans, and then still take humanity and all of creation to a place that is good and right inside of the free choices of human beings. That's like legitimate, real, like mind-bending sort of power. A being that can control everything is honestly not that powerful. I can like use anger and wrath and rage to make everybody in my house do exactly what I want them to do. You know what's a lot harder? Is to actually use love and growth and encouragement to get the children and the people in my house to become who I have in mind that they can actually become. So it's a way more difficult task. So Earth's future is a joint venture. But think about it. Throughout the entirety of the Bible, it's that. Jesus' incarnation is God saying to earth, this is still a joint venture. You've taken this a direction that it should have never gone, but I am not taking agency or the freedom of choice or the ability for humans to influence the world. I'm not taking that away from them. So what does he do? He becomes a human. That's why he becomes a human. There's several reasons why, but that's one of the big reasons why. Because humans actually have agency, influence over the world. So Jesus actually becoming a human, the Son of God becoming a human, is God saying to the earth, I still want humans to have influence over this thing. I still want their choices to matter, but I need to influence this a little bit, so I'm going to actually become a human. Jesus commissioned to his disciples, after Jesus has done what was necessary to do to cleanse humanity, to forgive humanity, and then to empower humanity to actually not be under, the flesh, the world, and the demonic realm anymore. After he does that by dying on a cross and ascending to heaven, filling humanity with his Spirit, those who want that, fills humanity with his Spirit, he commissions humans to go about his work. He didn't say, hey, I've done this thing now where I'll take people to heaven when they die, and so now that people are going to go to heaven when they die, if they'll just say this prayer, I'm going to go up in heaven and wait around for a few thousand years, and then at the end of a few thousand years, I'll come back, and everybody that made the right choice, well, they get to go to heaven. Everybody that made the wrong choice, they get to go to hell. He didn't say that in the Great Commission. He said, I want you to carry on every single thing that I've been doing, which is the renewal of the earth. I want you to carry on new creation while I sit at the right hand of the Father. So he passed back off to humanity influence of the world after he regained the ability for humans to do and be who they were always meant to be. So Paul's promise in Romans 8 is that creation itself is waiting for all of the humans that are on the earth to become who they were always meant to be. So Romans 8 is still exactly that. Romans 8 also, if you get further on in Romans 8, you're getting to a place where it says some very interesting things. That if we remain in Jesus, if we're willing to suffer with Jesus, that we'll also reign with Jesus over the entire world. Super weird, super wild, a little bit crazy. You don't think about like, God is training me to reign over the world with him when you're in the middle of changing diapers, when you're in the middle of a conflict with your spouse, when you're in the middle of a conflict at work. You don't think about that, but the reality that Paul is trying to portray is God wants human beings to be the ones who rule the earth, liberate it, and cause it to flourish. That's his desire, and he is not changing his desires, even when humans don't influence the world in the way that it should go. So, and then again, the entire book of Galatians is about the fact that you are sons and daughters, not servants. And the reason I bring that up is what I mentioned a minute ago. It is very easy to conceive of God as a controlling master, and your responsibility to him is to be a submissive servant. That is not the story of the Old Testament. It is not the story of the New Testament. It is not the words of Jesus to anybody. It has always been a joint venture between man and God uniting to create the earth into the picture that God has in his mind. Specifically why Jesus prays what he prays. Let your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. It's done in the heavens in a particular way, and it's done on the earth in another way, specifically because humans are the linchpin in it being accomplished on the earth. But the reality is, like I said, it can go one of two ways. When we start to conceive of the future with the mindset that God is a controlling master and we are supposed to be submissive servants, then what we do when we conceive of the future is we believe that my desires for the future don't matter at all. My thoughts for the future don't matter at all. My influence over the future doesn't matter at all. All I need to do is to step back and just ask God, what do you want me to do? 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 So you resign all of your humanity under the conception that God is just going to control the future and you need to be drug along in it and try to figure out all the lessons that he has for you. So that's one side of this thing that we can fall off on that's not really helpful. It's not beautiful. It's not life-giving. It's not the story of the Bible, but it is something that humans can do when we conceive of the future, and especially when opposition hits us. We can get hit by opposition. We can get hit by hurdles. We can get hit by difficulties. We can get hit by confusion. We can get by things that don't make a lot of sense. And when we get hit by those things, and a lot of times not just when we get hit by them, but when we have to stay underneath them for a really, really long time, there's something that can develop in us, which is resignation, that I can't actually influence this world. When you begin to believe that you can't actually influence this world, it can send you into that resigned, depressed place, specifically because you are a human being who was created to influence this world. There's a reason why running up against like burden after burden after burden after burden after burden, there's a reason why you have energy to do it, energy to do it, energy to do it, and then that energy fades, and you go into a resigned place of, it's just going to be what it's going to be. I can't influence this world. It's because your humanness is responding to a barrier that knows at a deep level that it shouldn't be that way. And ultimately, you go to a place where you find a greater strength than you had before, or you have to rework the things that you think, or you resign. And you say, I just can't. But your humanness is saying, no, you can. There is a way forward. You just don't know what it is yet, but your humanness wants to be able to influence this world. And that is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. That's a human thing. But like I said, the other side of that scenario, and I think we can fall into this too, is where we conceive of the future in such a way that fear and the fear of things recurring that maybe happened in our past, or the fear of a negative outcome in the future, leads us to want to exercise so much control and to not let freedom happen around us that we end up choking out our life. We choke out the people around us. We choke out the people we love. We just choke out the future because we're trying to exercise too much influence on the world. So if you can kind of look at that, one of those is the product of not trusting ourselves. One of those is the product of not trusting God and his goodness. So there is a way to engage in our understanding of the future in a way that's actually life-giving and good and freeing. And that it's not just that Earth's future is a joint venture, but that your future is a joint venture. All of that stuff aside, like all of what the future is and how fear can shape you and all those things, the bottom of that is just a plea. The bottom of that is the desire for you guys who are a part of this church to recognize fully that if we do engage with Jesus and we are really going to live the Christian life, that it really does depend on us embracing our human role over influencing this world. But it also means we embrace our child of God role and letting his vision and his design be the thing that not just guides us, but holds us as we face really, really difficult things in our life and frustrating things in our life and setbacks in our life. So as you embrace influencing the future, there's all these layers that can affect that, right? And there's one little layer that I wanted to unpack for a minute. Especially over the course of the last 2 years, where, I think we got to the end of 2020 and we were like, whew, super glad 2020 is over with, and COVID's going to be done, and it's going to be a super great year, 2021. You remember that. You remember the end of 2020. And you remember thinking like, we made it. And 2021 is going to be like blast off to the moon, right? Like my investment accounts are just going to like, whoo, and that didn't happen. And like the world is going to open up and there's going to be way less fighting on the news and in social media. And then Ukraine, happened. And so like there was so much that we got to the end of 2020 and we're like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And then in the middle of all that, there became this kind of like I don't know, it's not a chant, but it's like a phrase that got used over and over and over again. And it was how Christians regard fear, right? And it was like, if something was going on, then we're going to call it fear, and we're going to say we don't want anything to do with that. There was just sort of this overblown way of responding to fear, especially among Christian circles. Like it was very much like we're just not going to let fear have any hold on us, you know what I mean? And so there's something that I want to unpack for us a little bit this morning, especially as we jump into next year and we jump into a couple things. As we do embrace what it means to influence the future, but also what it means to influence the future with our Heavenly Father and as children of our Heavenly Father, fear itself is a legitimate thing that can infect your decisions and infect your future. Like, it is a very legitimate thing that you can, out of a place of fear of not wanting to become like your dad, you completely do the opposite of what your dad did, and the result of your future is there are a lot of things that manifest that were very similar to what your dad did in his family. Or I do not want to become like my mom, and so instead of becoming like my mom, I do things in the exact opposite. But then what unfolds is you find out in the future it was still very powerful, the opposite of what you were trying to do. It actually resulted in very similar things that just happened in the other way. And so there are ways that we can look at things that have happened to us and things that have harmed us and things that have wounded us, and we can let legitimate fear and like this like agitation over what could happen. And I'll give you an example. It's real easy in my home. When my kids will have behaviors that I look at and I remember caused a lot of rejection in my life whenever I was in junior high and high school, I can see behaviors that are me, but they are behaviors that did not result in something good. And there can be this response of, like in a moment, this like word will cross my mind that if you don't do this, like if you don't do something about this, and so what happens is like, I like discipline the crap out of them, you know what I mean? Like I just go too far with it, you know? And it's all because there's this like fear that I don't want you to have to live through some of the pain that I lived through, because I can see some of you reflected in me, and I gotta choke it out, you know? And I end up like, I've got a child that's an actual human, you know, that I'm choking out, not just a behavior and a memory from my past. Yeah. But it's like, so when I say that fear of the future can infect the present, that's precisely what I mean. That's a good, easy example. And I mean, again, but that can happen like with our workplace. That can happen with our finances, you know. I mean, half of you know, whenever you have a stock and you see it like, you know, it's going down. And then fear, you're like, I'm going to sell. Well, that's the dumbest possible thing you can do, right? Like buy high, sell low. That's stupid. Like, yeah. You don't say that when you're selling. You're just scared and like, oh, good. It's like, wait it out, man. Okay, anyway. But that's the thing, is it happens in all these different avenues, is the fear of the future causes this like response that is not going to produce anything good. It's just not going to produce anything good. But I brought up what I brought up about 2020 and 2021 and kind of the social milieu that erupted in that time, because I want to unpack the difference between fear and legitimate concern. And I think that's become hard for us to see sometimes, right? Because there is a difference between fear and legitimate concern. So an example of legitimate concern, right? Like I walk into my house. I've got 4 kids, all under the age of 9 now, and to make the the 4 hours that I'm home on a weekday actually like a meaningful time, but also not chaotic, and also have everyone in the house fed with something that is nourishing and is hopefully at least a few days a week, not from a box, not from preservatives, from all the little videos I watch about how that's killing my body, and then I get all guilty when I feed it. You know what I'm talking about. Like the 3-minute clips that you can watch about the certain foods that can just heal your body, and then those other foods that destroy. Yeah, like, so I'm trying. They got to have something nourishing. We've got to connect at some level. Do you know what I mean? Like we have to have an eye-to-eye interaction. I also want you to like learn some different things like a sport or drawing or something like that. Like, so we got to make time for all this and so like I have these legitimate concerns. Like they're legitimate. It's not fear of something bad happening. It's like, no, it takes management for life to happen in a way that causes flourishing for sure. So I walk into my house with a lot of legitimate concerns, and I spend that time under sort of it's sort of an anxious cloud, for lack of a better word. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of the cloud of managing the chaos. And it's the cloud of like making sure that everything goes. And it's not controlling because I'm still giving freedom. It's like, no, you can't have chocolate milk, but you can have water or this, And it takes a lot of creativity to come up with that choice to give to them, as opposed to like, no, it's no Fanta. No, 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 no. Because I find myself saying no a lot. And then, so it's like, how do you manage that? And it takes a lot of creativity. It takes a lot of like trying not to become somebody that I've seen come out of me a lot. But you know what I mean? It's that cloud of management. It's that cloud of anxiety that is governing all of these legitimate concerns that are in front of me. And it's not the same as fear. Fear makes me like kind of choke things out, and it literally infects the future. Legitimate concern can actually bring about good, flourishing things, but the problem is I'm not present to enjoy the goodness that's going on because I'm so concerned managing all the little steps. Do you know what I mean? I'm sort of lost in it. And it's not a bad thing. It's just not that great of a thing. Do you know what I mean? It's just not that great of a thing. And it's a necessary thing, but it's certainly not that great of a thing when I have 4 hours with my kids at night. You know what I mean? And they're young and it feels like it's going to last forever, but it's already not lasting forever. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's already halfway through. So really the next text that I want to show you guys, and I want to look at the same text in 3 different translations, because, well, before we do that, I made a little phrases. I mean, it's good to have these little phrases, but, let's just look at the little phrases real quick. Can we do that? Yeah. So we did Earth's future as a joint venture. Fools, let fear of the future infect the present. That's a foolish thing to do. You let the fear of the future infect the present. But the next one is this, is the wise, they let legitimate concern of the future inform the present. Like I said, it's a good thing, right? And trying to find the line between fear and legitimate concern, not easy. You do that in your own life, in your own time, with your own kids and your own jobs and your own stuff, right? That's not my job, that's your job. But I do believe there's actually something more. And I want to show you this text 3 different ways because I want to show you how difficult it has been for Christians to even engage with this concept, specifically because it's so subtle. So it's Proverbs 29:18. I'm going to do the King James Version, then the NIV, and then the ESV. So let's look at that real quick. Let's do King James. You'll probably have seen this 1,000 times, usually on New Year's Day sermons. So the last New Year's Day sermon you're at probably had this text. It's Proverbs 29:18. It says, this is the KJV, where there is no vision, the people what? Y'all know this. The people perish. But in the KJV it says, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Yoda, a little bit like Yoda. He that keepeth the law, happy is he. Just imagine that in a Yoda voice. No, I'm not going to do it. All right, but keep in mind, so, do we have it? Is it there? Did I load it? You got the NIV? Okay, the KJV's not in there? Could have been my fault. Could have been my fault. So in the KJV it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Okay, let's go to the NIV since I put that one in there. In the NIV it says, where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instructions. The NIV they had a lot of anxious interpreters inside there. So they would take a sentence, or they would take a word in Greek, and they didn't want it to say exactly what it was saying, or they'd take a word in Hebrew, it didn't want to say exactly what it was saying, and then they would like build on it. NIV if you're still in it, it's good. It can help you understand things, but sometimes they'll take things in like a weird left turn. But here, they said where there is no revelation, right? So in the first one, it was kind of like the idea of vision, right? And, we're in the United States, a capitalistic country. The idea of vision, anybody could have that. Like, entrepreneurs can have that. Anybody could have vision, you know what I mean? Like, I've got, I know y'all watch HGTV all the time, and then you see some it's usually, a guy who's a carpenter and a woman who, like, is a designer or something, and she's like, oh, I've got vision for this space, And so anybody can have vision, right? And so the king... So the King James translated that word as vision. The NIV translates it as revelation. So you can see even in that translation, there's something in the original text that's not just about your ability to like conceive of the future and then make it happen in the present. They're saying there's something going on that is more than just the ability to see into the future and make it happen. It has something to do with a spiritual or a God sort of influence into that vision, if that makes sense, right? All right, so let's look at it in the ESV. The ESV is not perfect. It's helpful. We use it here. So here, this is how ESV took it. Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. And honestly, if you have your little ESV open and you've got it'll have the little number next to it, and you can press it, and it tells you that there's more stuff going on here. But if you pressed it, what it would tell you is that the other translation for this half is, where there is no prophetic vision, the people are discouraged. But blessed is he who keeps the law, which is a good translation there. But where there is no prophetic vision, the people are discouraged. This is, to me, the interesting part of all this, where I want to tie together what it looks like to live as a joint venture in between heaven and earth as humans who are relating to God. And what it looks like to maybe live, definitely not in a fear place, but in a place that's beyond legitimate concern, if we can say it that way. Let me say this phrase first, and then let's unpack it for a minute. So if fools let fear of the future infect the present, and the wise actually let legitimate concerns in the future inform the present, there's something better than that, though. The children of God let vision, and when I say vision, I want you to hear me. I don't only mean that, like, I have vision for the space. Do you know what I mean? Or like, I have vision for what this company could be. I mean something a little bit more than that, a little bit different, that the ESV and the NIV captured in their translation. The children of God let vision color the future so they can actually enjoy the present. I don't think God made you a human so that you can manage a bunch of tasks and live a pseudo-anxious life that actually results in, medium to high amounts of stress in all of your daily life while you accomplish what he has for you. Like, that doesn't sound great to me or you, but it's also not the story of the Bible. And so what I mean from this text is this: the children of God let vision color the future so they can enjoy the present, so they can actually be present in the present. Let me give you an example. Like I said earlier, the day before Christmas, we found out that the fire suppression system, which you can't turn off without voiding your insurance, had sprung a massive leak over the stage that we had just completed. And when Paul found it and got a hold of me, there was like a solid foot of water up to the stage, like a solid foot of water. And it had basically rained down on the only part of the sanctuary that we had actually invested quite a bit of money and actually went through a lot of frustration in the middle of construction to get done. Felt a degree of like, whew, we're 98% done. Now we can shift focus. And on top of that, those of you who are Oak Grovers, that several years ago, that exact same thing happened. And so there was a list of things that we needed to do before that freeze hit to make sure that that didn't happen again. And we did that list of things that we were supposed to do. We took care of those legitimate concerns, and then that thing still hits. You know what I mean? You can influence the future. You can't control the future. But the reality is we have a ton of legitimate concerns that we've got to manage. We got to figure out what it's like to do church in here, especially when college students come back. Is that one services or two services? What do we do with children's ministry? Is that having children, watched on both services or not? What do we do over there? How long is that going to take? What are all the things that we need to do to make sure that we interact with insurance well, to make sure the insurance covers what they're supposed to cover? All of these legitimate concerns, you know what I mean? And none of them are illegitimate and none of them are fear-based. They're just legitimate. It's like, we got to figure this thing out. We have all these things we got to file in order and make sure happen in the right way. And we need to do it quickly because we don't want to be in this for much longer. But the reality is for those of us that have been working on it, it's super discouraging. For those of you who are Oak Grovers and it happened years ago and then it happened again, it's just discouraging to walk in and see this place that you love, that you've fixed before, that you've spent a bunch of time. It's just discouraging. It just rips your heart out of you. And you're like, ugh. And the reality is I think many of you can have that exact same situation in many aspects of your life. Places where you feel like you've cleared a hurdle, but then that hurdle just kind of jumps back up in a new way right in front of you. Or places where you've made drastic change to fix some issues, but then you get in the middle of those changes and it seems like it has fixed all the issues and then they all crop up again. It can happen at work, it can happen in your personal life, it can happen with children, it can just happen all over the place. And so there's a bunch of legitimate concerns there. But there was kind of a sense, as we got the news of what happened, as we got the news of what happened at the church, I got a chance to just go to a coffee shop and spend a few minutes alone. And there was something that just kind of resonated within me. And that this is a time that God wants to build intimacy between his people. And it just resonated, right? And then 3 days later, I get an email that says literally the exact same thing. And at first, that little flutter of feeling, it's easy when I'm in my skeptical place to say, yeah, of course you tell yourself good things, right? Of course you do. The reality is, no, I tell myself bad things way more than I tell myself good things, and I bet most of you are the same way. That little voice in my head is typically not telling me a bunch of flowery things. That voice in my head is typically telling me all the things that are about to explode and go poorly and how my life's going to careen off over a cliff and everybody's going to be dead. And I'm going to lose everything. But there was that little flutter that just said, hey, this is a time of intimacy. This is a time to get people back together about the main thing. And then again, 3 days later, I get an email that says that exact same thing, that God wants to do something to create intimacy among his people and that he'll handle the rest of that. And then we have a prayer team that's developing right now, and what they do is before the service, they just gather together and they say, what is God up to? We've got worship, we got teaching, but what does God want to do today that just might hit people in a particular way or speak to somebody in a way that is very specific in that moment to these people? And John led it this morning, and John came up and he just said, man, there's just a sense of expectancy that God really wants to use this time to unify our people. All of that influence, 3 different people feeling the same thing, hearing the same thing, sensing the same thing. So you can see where there's this degree of legitimate concern that we need to manage and carry and oversee, and all that is good. But if that's the bottom, if that's it, that's super discouraging. We can handle it. We're strong, smart people. Great, we can handle it. But there's this other verse in Romans 8 that says, and again, we can throw this around all the time in ways that don't matter, but there is a legitimate place that this text actually makes sense and means something. And it says, God works all things together for good for those who love him. It's like an actual verse that Paul 2,000 years ago actually pinned down because he recognized that God is not up there controlling all things, but God is up there powerful enough to use every single thing that happens to bring about a positive outcome. And I think that's what we're in the middle of here. We've got the opportunity to conceive of the future in a way where God is actually present, God is actually powerful, God is actually good, and God can actually do some things over the next several weeks that are actually better for this community than had we been in the sanctuary. Legit possibility. And if we allow it, right, if we can actually allow faith or belief or whatever that thing is that grabs a hold of the things that God says and actually allows them to affect the way we live our current life, then we might actually enjoy this time together. We might actually enjoy it. And then I don't just say that for us as a corporate body, right? I say that in every single facet of the places that we have to live as human beings. It's easy to apply that concept to a church because a church is a spiritual place that God is really involved in. It's not always easy to apply that to your business or your job. It's not always easy to apply it there because that's physical. It's not spiritual. God obviously cares more about the church than he cares about your job or your business, and it's just entirely not true. I think if you were to spend a little bit of time alone, and it doesn't take very long at all, and you might not even need to be alone, but the Spirit of God that's in you will just flutter up and will whisper things to you that are his perspective for your current life. He will legitimately do that so that you can go from managing legitimate concerns to stepping into his promises about what's going on. And so there's places in your life where fear is actually running the show. You got to address that. We got to deal with it. You can't let it remain. And there are people around here that want to do that. They want to help you understand the way that fear can infect and give you tools to not let fear infect the choices that you make in the present. Right? That's something that we can deal with. It doesn't always happen in a moment, but it can happen in a moment. But sometimes it takes engaging in a tool for sure. There are places where legitimate concern is actually producing a measure of fruitfulness, but it's robbing the life from your day-to-day life. It's just filling you with that, like, you know what I mean? Like, I can do this, but I can't do this forever. And those are the places, whether it's parenting, whether it's finances, whether it's your work, whether it's your school, whatever it is, that there is an opportunity to soften. Just tell God how you're feeling, how you're conceiving, what's going on. Open up that kind of channel of just communication to the being who made all things, legitimately cares about you, legitimately knows that those concerns that you have are meaningful, but can also bring you to a place that has his perspective, which is not robbed of life, that has his perspective, which is not constrained. It has his perspective that actually sees all things as a possibility, that has his perspective. And when you can live inside of that perspective while you manage those concerns, you'll find yourself making a little bit better decisions, operating with a little bit more creativity, operating with a little bit more energy to actually face those things. You'll just find yourself operating in a different way that's not just wise, but is also spiritual and life-giving and good. And so, as you consider those things, well, we're still trying to have prayer team at the back. So if there is like a place that fear's got you, please make your way to the back and just engage the prayer team member. A lot of times just another person. You know, we're not Catholic, so we don't go to confession, but we still believe that interacting with another human being who is filled with the Spirit of God that can provide perspective is just oftentimes a good thing. It doesn't mean that you're like recommitting your life to Jesus. If you want to do that, please do that. That's a good thing to do. But there's always room to just engage in prayer. But also as we close in worship, I think it's good to just spend a moment because you're about to run off into life. Like you're about to leave here and hit life. So just take the little bit of moments you can to just kind of softly interact with our Father and see if he might. He may not speak something crazy across your head. It may not be this wild vision, right? Those things are possible, good, they happen in the Bible, fine. A lot of times it's just the flutter of the Holy Spirit who is becoming one with your spirit, which is what Jesus died to make happen. is just breathing a little bit of perspective and strength into you. And all it takes is for you to say, I'll run with that. Let's run with that. Let's run with that and see what happens. That's really what I'm asking as we worship, as we kind of spend these last few minutes together. Is there a place where you can feel that anxiety, right? And it's not fearful, it's just legitimate concerns just there. Is there something that God might speak or direct or just be with you in as it regards that? And I would say take some time as we worship to kind of engage with him on that level. And then I want to close with this. We as a church, as Mosaic, right? As Mosaic Church, we've been through something like this before. We went from everything changing, school getting shut down, the place of worship changing, times changing, and we saw it just suck the energy and the life out of our people. And you can stay with it, and you can stay with it, and you can stay with it, but it just begins to suck the life. And so what I'm asking for you as Mosaic Church, like the people that are committed to this church, is don't use this time as a time to withdraw because it's tight in here. Just come and be crowded. Do you know what I mean? I think there is something meaningful when humans gather together. And I'm not going to overblow it and make it like the whole trajectory of your life is going to change. But maybe the whole trajectory of your life changes. But in reality, it's good. It's meaningful. It's just meaningful. And don't use the difference and the fact that you don't have like 12 feet of pew space, to lay down in as a reason to say, well, I'll make room for somebody else. We would much rather do 2 services because it's crowded in here than have it easy. We didn't sign up for this because we wanted something easy. And I don't think you get your kids dressed and you get them here and you deal with all of that because you want something easy. I think you do want something meaningful. And so I do think there is a choice to either withdraw and find a comfortable space, but I think there is something purposeful and meaningful that you'll find if you commit to gathering and we figure out the problems that come with gathering. I think that's important. All right, so if you'll stand up with me, I want to pray and bless you before we worship one more time.